All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our sixth meeting. Appreciate everybody being here. We got about 21 folks, so we can go ahead and start for now. Just as a reminder, I am recording this, so we got a lot to do today. Let's, John, if you can pull up the regs. I guess we'll start with 0.04, then we'll go to 05, 06, 02, and then 03.
Okay, hold on for a second. Let's see if I can blow it up.
You picked a good day not to go in, John.
Yeah, I see. How did you know I wasn't in? I guess because I'm home and yeah, okay. I forgot that I had my camera on.
For those of you who don't know, the commission or the whole building lost power today.
Yeah, I guess BG has some explaining to do, right? We'll figure that out later because here it's more than just our building.
That gets into the plan.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go to 4 per your direction. I think we're going to have to go back to 1 also, Chuck, because there were some changes to 1 suggested. So after as we cycle through 5, 6, and go back to 1.
Okay, yes, sir. Sounds like a good plan.
All right. So, I tried. We only had edit suggestions from 4 different parties, so I tried to color code them. So if you don't see any background, that's an excellent proposal. And then if you see things in yellow or orange, you can see the legend. So I would ask Andrea or Ethan or somebody from Exelon would talk about their change here to 04.
This is Andrea, and we should be specific about what we're talking about. So just as a general rule, regulations as a legal document should be precise and unambiguous about what they're talking about. This whole section is about electric system plans, annual electric system update, and the preliminary electric system plan. So that's why we changed it in the header.
Okay, is any stakeholder oppose this? All right. So I've accepted all that. Okay, so then we get down and Dr. Bartlett had a couple edits and Exelon had a couple edits. So it seems like electric system plan development and annual electric system plan update is somewhat consistent with the previous change. So does anyone have an issue with this?
No.
All right, yeah. If you don't hear anything, John, just go ahead and accept it.
Okay, and then Exelon had some other changes. Does anyone have any objections to these changes proposed? All right, I'm going to accept them then.
All right. That rolling right along.
I hope it's this easy. We've only really got one more meeting to fine tune this, so this is an important meeting. All right, Dr. Bartlett also recommended this change?
So, I make we make an edit later. I think there's some confusion between planning development and reporting. Metrics are really a reporting function and not a planning. Like, we don't incorporate metrics into our planning. We report out on metrics in our reporting. So I would say that this is inappropriate here. We include it later in the reporting section.
All right, can you take me down to that, Andrea? What section are you?
It's what's the reporting here? There's a whole section 0.05 is all about reporting on metrics.
Well, see, that's the problem, because there's no, let's go to section 5 real quick. There's no metrics currently agreed.
Well, but we can't, well, so we can't like put metrics into something that haven't been agreed upon, right? So, but they are a reporting function. They should be, whenever we have metrics, they should be reported on your actual performance.
I see your points. We are referring to reporting in both, you know, regardless of what we accept, you know, either the original, which is crossed out, or the no, it is a reporting requirement here. So I see your points. So I guess I would be, Chuck, I'm advising you. I would be okay with that.
No, I agree. I think that makes sense.
Okay. So basically, leave it like that. Okay, and then all these other changes are just typos, which I'll get later. All right, so we're on the C with data collection.
Hey, John, this is Andy with CEG on behalf of OPC. Just wanted to flag the oh, is this not 53? I'm just, yeah, on footnote 53. So last meeting, I believe it was on sort of the 3-stage or a similar process that we were recommending following along with FERC 1920. The utilities were going to sort of take that back and think about it. I wondered if we could talk about that.
Yes, that's what I updated in green here, because that was a note from the last meeting.
And we might have missed that. I don't know. Jacob?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to hop on camera. Yeah, so we had talked about it, and obviously, you know, OPC kind of provided those recommendations. I think we had kind of left it the way it was, really recognizing you know, the discussions that we had around flexibility and capturing kind of, you know, what had been agreed upon previously within the working group in the straw proposal, and using that language as, you know, still the, you know, the foundation of the regulation. So recognizing kind of the work that's been done to date in the working group, and kind of having that continue to reflect that, and having that kind of flexibility for the utilities still within kind of that structure of the regulation, recognizing for each utility this process may look a little bit different in terms of how they go about this.
Well, I guess yeah, let me think about this. Jacob, can you run through with me all the discrete points where you're going to be meeting with stakeholders, there should be at least two.
Yeah, so the excluding the technical conference, there'd be a meeting here or, some type of engagement with stakeholders around data collection. So that's kind of that first step. And then the second engagement is in aligning around the inputs and assumptions. So that's a second meeting, with stakeholders, a second engagement with stakeholders, looking for that input and feedback. And
So where is that in the regs? So can you?
So that would be in C is the first one in data collection. Then D would also include, engagement with stakeholders and identifying that discrete point for stakeholder feedback. And then obviously the technical conference is the biggest piece, really, where we're publishing the preliminary plan, and stakeholders are able to comment, speak to it during the technical conference, and provide that feedback and input there as well.
All right. Now, if I recall the FERC order 1920 there were 3 discrete points.
That's correct. You're correct, John. And the commission said we were supposed to consider it, not necessarily mirror.
Yeah. So I guess OPC, I'll throw it back to you, Andy. Saying that there's 2 discrete points here, is that satisfactory? And if not, what are you recommending again?
Yeah, I think obviously 2 is better than 1. So I think our edits last time were meant to sort of provide more structure and information around what was expected to be presented and how feedback would be collected, versus just saying that you shall identify a discrete point. Like that could be as simple as saying email us, that type of thing. And I don't know that there is any language around other than publishing inputs and assumptions, like how whether it's a meeting, so we put in language around like a publicly noticed meeting and certain timeframes for
Right.
feedback to consider. So we feel like that's more helpful than leaving it more ambiguous.
All right, well, we'll get to that second. I'm just trying to align, to me, I actually view the technical conference as a discrete point to what Jacob was stating, because of the fact that it's preliminary and you have an opportunity to provide comments on that, before things are final. So
you're considering that as almost like a third meeting or a third
yes,
opportunity.
yes,
Yeah, and I would say, I think that's how we view it as well, like going back in time in terms of this process. As before the commission established that it wanted a technical conference, we had planned to, I think the straw proposal at the time had planned for the utilities to publish their draft, plan or preliminary plan and seek stakeholder feedback there, right? So we are always planning for those 3 points of stakeholder engagement in the process. It's just, that technical conference became kind of formal and became a formal stakeholder engagement opportunity at that step. So I think we were always envisioning those 3 points. It's just that technical conference kind of became that third point. And to your point, John, it is a place where stakeholders will be able to file comments, make comments during the technical conference as well, and for the commission as well to be able to provide that feedback and direction.
okay. So I'd like to move from the 3-point discussion to the rest of OPC's recommendations for more specificity. They do have some recommendations in here that we asked you all to consider about how things like the forum should take place 60 days in advance of filing, things of that nature. Have you considered any of that specificity?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we talked about having that specificity around a calling for a specific meeting versus the flexibility. And I think especially on the data collection piece, more so than maybe the alignments and assumptions piece, is really looking for that flexibility. Obviously, the utility would still define it, right? That's, we would be identifying that discrete point for stakeholder feedback, but recognizing that, especially in data collection, that may be, taking the form of different already existing relationships and existing meetings we may have with key stakeholders and identifying those spots. And so really allowing the utilities to be able to have the flexibility to identify what that looks like in terms of how they want to approach that. Versus kind of being prescriptive in what that step looks like. Again, obviously, the utility would be, making public and aware like what that discrete point is. But that was the thought there, is still allowing that kind of flexibility, especially early on in that step.
So you don't want to have a specified time frame, but you have to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and obviously we can get to the timeline and we fill that out. Like, there's a lot of steps in this process, right? This is already a very elongated process, really reaching over a 1 year, well beyond a 1 year period, as we kind of outlined in our timeline. And so as we start to add in some of these steps and specifying specific timelines within those steps, it really starts to put constraints and challenges within that. And so again, allowing some of the ability for utilities to identify where that may best work for their schedules, I think was what we were thinking about there.
Can I just add, from a legal standpoint, regulations, there's a balance in regulations where you want to have a process well-defined enough that, the utility and the stakeholders can follow it, but you don't want regulations to be too prescriptive. So I think we're working through that balance. Some of the things we've stricken are because we're starting to get so prescriptive that we're losing the commission's directive that ultimately we're responsible and it's our, the planning is our responsibility. And we need, to Jacob's point, we need that flexibility to use the business judgment in planning. So I think throughout this process, we should be keeping in mind that we don't want this to be too prescriptive, and there's kind of a balance that needs to be struck.
All right. I think,
Go ahead, Samrit.
Hi. So I understand Andrea's concerns about being too specific in a regulation, but I guess the third, number 3, relevant state policy goals and utility that the utility is considering. I don't know how that is. I guess being too specific, I think it would be helpful to stakeholders in the initial phases, I think including that.
So I think you'll see a kind of a theme throughout here where if something is already included in a sentence, we don't, and then there's a, kind of a proviso that adds more that has already been said, we strike things. So this is 1 in 1, 2 and 3 are just already incorporated in, or we viewed it as already collected data. Plus in 4, you already have A, which talks about policy goals. So we just felt that 2 and 3 were actually duplicative of what was already there. It was not saying, Samrit, that they are not relevant. It's just that they were already covered.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with 3 on that, but I would not agree with sources of data, because already collected data is one thing, but it's important to me to identify the sources of that data. I know when we did the electrification study, You know, we talked about like sources for electrification data related to, you know, EVs, transportation, and what EIA had versus what was being projected by, you know, other parties. So I don't think it's acceptable in a planning sense to just talk about collected data. I think you also need to talk about the sources of that data. So my recommendation is to accept most. Chuck, this is to you. My recommendation is to accept most of this, but add, you know, where the edit is made in one. The electric company shall provide an overview of the already collected data, including data sources.
And then get
And then,
strike three.
Strike three.
Yeah, that sounds good. Jonah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm just a little bit confused because it does seem like 4 has more of a discretionary may than the 2 and 3, which were shalls.
They were actually mays, Jonah, because if you look at what was stricken, that may include key data and sources and relevant state policy goals.
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Simrit.
And I apologize for this comment because it's going to take us back a little bit. I think Andrea had a comment on section B, E about matrices. I think she indicated striking that because it's not really a planning exercise. I guess they don't necessarily agree with that. But Andrea, can you repeat what you said? I had some computer issues, so I didn't really.
Sure. All I was saying, Samrit, is that metrics are a reporting function. We report metrics, you know, how we performed against whatever the metric is. We don't actually include metrics into our planning cycle. So we include a lot of data, but you don't include the metrics. You report on the metrics and your performance. So that was the only distinction that we had. And so that moves down to reporting rather than being part of the planning cycle.
But I think this is the reporting section, correct? We're talking about section 04 and the annual updates.
Yeah, but summary, I think I'll just take you back to 5. Regardless of what we decide here, it's stated that an electric company shall include metrics in its preliminary electric system plan or annual electric system plan update. And then even if we strike those and accept Dr. Bartlett's suggestion, you know, we can make sure that that reporting requirement is adequately covered. So, you know, so I just think that the point, which I thought was an acceptable point, is that, you know, it's already prescribed as a reporting requirement. You shouldn't have to duplicate it.
It's already included in section 05. I guess my point is I think matrices I feel like are very important in this discussion. So if we are going to accept Dr. Bartlett's comments in section 05, I think I would be okay with that. I just want to make sure they're covered somewhere. Because we were not sure if we're going to keep 05.
Well,
I think we'll keep it. We just have to figure out what we want.
yeah, I'm going to modify electric and just make sure we don't lose, if we accept Dr. Bartlett's item later, that this is a reporting requirement that is in your annual electric system plan update. Well, we'll figure out the wording later when we get to it, but we'll make sure that the reporting requirement is clear here. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, so I'm going back to C, which would like to move on from if we don't have any further comments here. Does this look okay? All right. So we had a 3 here,
Yeah.
and let's see if I can. All right, I'll have to pretty it up later, but
Show.
yeah, I don't like the stakeholder shall be identified at the electric company's sole discretion.
What's the point of that? Yeah, I like the one that you have is highlighted in yellow. That makes more sense to me.
Yeah, before we dive in, I added a definition for stakeholder because I know what the concern is, and you want to have sole discretion on who's a stakeholder, but that's not consistent with the PUA. And I recall Mr. Michael mentioning this at the last meeting, so I went back and researched it. And I'm adding a definition for a stakeholder means a person who is granted leave to intervene in an electric system plan proceeding pursuant to the stakeholder requirements in Public Utilities Article 3-106, which this is the 3-106. I put it in a footnote. You know, the commission, you know, should not grant leave if, you know, the parties to proceeding are adequately represented or representing that person already. And then, you know, they shouldn't also grant leave if the issues that person seeks to raise are irrelevant or material. So I really feel like, you know, I'd like to suggest that we take the definition from the PUA and apply it here, and then we don't have to get into that level of specificity by saying utilities get to veto a stakeholder, because really it's the commission that should be allowing stakeholders. And then further, Somry and staff added a qualified stakeholder, which means that not every stakeholder can receive CEI information. So I think that in some cases, it's, you know, you need to be qualified, and they added that definition. So can we knock these two things off at this point?
I'm okay with stakeholder. So I really have a concern about this type of proceeding having CEI and confidential data going out. This is not, the commission has made clear they do not want a litigated proceeding here. I don't understand if it's just to create like this whole thing is to create transparency and inputs that they can provide, right? And if given that goal and the commission's desire to not make this a litigated proceeding, I don't understand why we're giving away CEI and confidential data. I mean, what that leads to, the only reason you need that type of system data is if you're going to do like a shadow DSP, and then you're going to fight about who's right, right? So that creates the litigated proceeding that the commission doesn't want. They also said that they want this commission to be accessible to non-technical people. Non-technical people have no need to have any of our system data. And in fact, they don't know what to do with it. And so I don't understand why we're creating, it seems to be beyond and against the scope of what the commission envisioned to be giving away this type of system data.
Well, I agree that not every stakeholder should be able to be qualified, and then this does not specify how you become a qualified stakeholder other than signing an NDA. But to my knowledge, OPC is already able to request CEI data. So
I mean-
and I don't think you're going to be able to, you know, to have the. I don't think you're going to be able to prevent them from, you know, access to CEI data, subject to, you know, them signing non-disclosure agreements. But
I mean,
So-
I think it's a given. I mean, people, I mean, assuming we even get to the CEII stuff, which, I mean, hopefully that won't be an issue, and I agree with Andrea on that. But I don't know that we need to have a definition of qualified stakeholder.
yeah, I don't either. I really feel like we're digging too far into this, and we
Yeah.
should just stop at stakeholder. And then during a proceeding, if OPC wants access to data that is CEII protected, then they should just use their existing process. I don't think we need to define that in a way.
Well-
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Andrea.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
you're good.
But if OPC already has that power, then why do we need to put it in the?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but then again, then we still have the issue of, okay, so we have OPC, but now we're having this stakeholder, just general stakeholders. So, you know, there could be someone who intervenes as on behalf of residential customers. They, you know, with all respect, like residential customers don't need this data. They don't know what to do with it.
Well, they wouldn't be a stakeholder anyway, Andrea, because of the fact that, you know, their interests can be represented by OPC, and the commission would not grant leave for them to be a stakeholder, because they're already represented. That's why I want to rely on the PUA rule here.
Can I ask John? I know. Sorry, Damon. I know you have your hand up. I'll be quiet in a sec. So if OPC already has access, what is the purpose of having this stakeholder provision at all?
Because other people want to be able to have access, like Sierra Club, the CPSR, you know, that there are other organizations besides OPC that are going to want, you know, to have access to this planning information, including AOBA for, you know, PEPCO and things of that nature. So I just feel like we can get rid of a lot of, you know, the side issues by just relying on the commission to allow or to approve stakeholders, which is really what is required in the PUA. Now, even though let me collect my thoughts here, but even though you know, the DSP is under case 9665. The commission did in a prior order say that they were going to create a separate docket for each individual company under DSP. And in that vision, you know, an AOBA would probably only, you know, request to be a stakeholder in the PEPCO. And, you know, so you get, you know, AOBA is not going to be able to basically be granted leave to intervene in you know, BGE planning proceeding, for instance. So I just would refer you back to that particular order where, you know, the commission did indicate that they would be creating a separate docket for each company under DSP.
Right. Damon and then Herb.
Can you hear me okay, Judge?
Yes, sir.
And I think my comment has probably already been addressed. I was just going to second the removal of the qualified stakeholder.
Okay.
I think the discovery process already affords opportunities to address these
Right.
confidential issues to the extent they're raised in any
Right.
party has a concern with a confidential matter being requested for. So I think we're good with that.
Good. All right.
Thanks.
Herb.
Sure. Thank you, Judge. I guess one of the concerns that we have at SMECO is again regarding to that definition of stakeholder. You know, the people that live and work in a utility service area, or the leaders of our state. I think, are a stakeholder that have a say as to what happens within the state. My concern is that, there are a lot of entities from outside of the state of Maryland that are trying to influence what's going on, in the state. And we just want to make sure that, it's the local people that live and work in a service territory, and the state goals that are important to be included as stakeholders, and not open it up to a lot of outside interest beyond the state of Maryland.
And Herb, I would just refer you again, the commission will make those decisions on who is granted leave to intervene and ask discovery and things of that nature. You got to be able to trust the commission to make these decisions, and and they should be doing it according to the statute, which really provides a direction for the commission on granting leave to intervene.
Appreciate your input, John. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to move. We're going to keep stakeholder. We've eliminated the qualified stakeholder, and we're going to go back to the original item that led us to this. By the way, I can't see if Doug Markell's on, but thank you for that suggestion last meeting. I think that was very helpful. So basically, that would get rid of part of one, at least. Companies shall identify stakeholders. I don't think we need one. In the commission, the commission, we'll put that in the docket, who's a qualified stakeholder for a particular electric system plant. So I'm recommending to you, Chuck, to get rid of one. 3-1. Chuck, you there? Okay.
So you want to get rid of both the highlighted one and the one above?
Well, all right. I'm sorry. You're right. We should go to the top.
I mean, I don't mind getting rid of the one with the sole discretion, or rewording that, but I don't think companies shall provide a list of the stakeholders they engage. I don't think it's bad to provide who they engaged, but again, that's just me. I don't like the sole discretion language.
So if we're gonna stick to the definition of stakeholder, I think both of these go away because it's already defined for us. Like the commission will define it for us.
So it's anybody that's intervened.
Yeah, I mean, it then there's no question.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm just, go ahead, Damon.
Yeah, I mean, I may pull back a little bit. I would say that I think it's actually helpful to provide some insight as to who the utilities engage with as part of developing the plan. And they may not necessarily be stakeholders. So, I mean, I would broaden that to parties, because certainly as part of developing a plan, we may engage with a whole host of actors that may not necessarily be party stakeholders in the sense that they've intervened in a proceeding. And that's still valuable information. So.
All data stakeholders.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you raised a good point. You don't want to limit it to just stakeholders, and because if we want to get people to participate,
I would just say provide a list of the parties with whom they have engaged as part of developing the plan. I mean, period.
Maybe that's better.
Okay, so now we can get rid of this here, right? That I got highlighted. It's really covered. And this deletion here, I don't know that we should be getting rid of that item here.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, I think we got rid of it. Let me just make sure, because my edits aren't aligned with you anymore.
Yeah, you said it was redundant to C, which is
So
why
if you
got
go
rid
back
of
up to C, like regular C, it says electric company shall identify a discrete point to collect and customer inputs for consideration. Electric company shall provide an overview or
Already collected data.
it says methodology for collecting this data, including defined point for stakeholder comment. I mean, it seems to already be included in the main part of C.
Probably C and C1.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree with that. Would you like to get rid of it, Chuck?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue to keep it or get rid of it for that one, but just to add in the language that we proposed under sub-item 1B, we explicitly made an inclusion of kind of a caveat. Maybe it could have been worded differently or otherwise, but something about, the language in there right now sort of says open to collecting stakeholder and customer data inputs, but then there's also language about must be translatable into a forecast or something like that. And I guess that would be helpful. I don't know that I have a good wording for it, but it would be helpful to consider providing, like, here's our format, like, instead of just putting it all on stakeholders, you sort of say, okay, can you put that into a quantitative, or like, here's a template, that type of thing might be useful to consider.
Data, okay.
So I think, Chuck, you're thinking.
No, go ahead, please.
So every utility is going to be doing this a little bit differently, because we all do our system planning differently. I don't think a template is appropriate, because none of this is appropriate for a one size fits all. Andy just said what I fear this is providing all this information is going to devolve into, which is a shadow forecast, which is going to be litigating our forecast against somebody else's. I mean, he just said so that we can use it for a forecast. So I again, I'm just going to restate that I read that not to be the intention of the commission, that we litigate whose forecast is right. This is, again, just an input, a point for transparency and input into the process. It is not to fight about who did it right. And I think this is where we get very concerned with all of this information that we're supposed to be providing that seems to be leading towards litigation over who did it right.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I hear your point on that, Andrea, and my only comment here was in response to that. There it is. It's item 3, which is, if this section is saying stakeholders are going to have this venue or vehicle to provide input, and then there's a provision that says shall be done in a manner that is usable as forecasting data inputs, I think that has a very specific connotation on the utility side. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it may be useful to have a caveat or provision that the utility shall define what that is, so that stakeholders don't mistakenly say something in a meeting and then it's not heard. You know what I mean? And I did this at Portland General.
I misunderstood, Andy. I'm sorry. This is the data that comes in from stakeholders. That
yes,
I agree. I agree.
And I did this, like, I had solar stakeholders in Oregon that, would raise their hand and say, well, I've got this great list of like potential customers who are going to put in solar. And I said, great, like, give me, I need a quantitative something I can put in, but I also, you can make caveats to say that's not how our process works, because we can't just take one-off like input from everybody and then mash them together. Like, there's different ways I think it could be discussed in a reasonable manner. Just wanted to make sure it was somehow reflected, but thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Andy. Thank you for
listen to this. I've updated it. Would that be acceptable to both parties?
To be done in a manner that is usable alternative. I don't understand that as defined by the electric company.
Meaning, if they want to provide a template or some sort of structure for providing certain types of feedback, they should be able to do that.
All data.
or just leave it as usable?
I think, yeah, because that's more on the stakeholders giving it to the utilities.
All right.
That's just me.
Yeah, it may
Yeah,
not be
you're the judge.
No, this is a team effort.
All right.
Are we good with this?
Yeah, I mean, there is the feedback, so like it is, you know, as long, I mean, that was part of why, I guess, as long as in the assumptions meeting or assumptions, like how it's being reported or discussed, how is the input being used, or what are the inputs finally being used, then there's that understanding, I guess, from stakeholders. As long as there's a feedback, I just kind of raised it more for awareness. I don't know that how it could live in the language other than saying, you know, and I agree, like not everyone should use the same template, but each utility maybe defines their own process. So I'd be fine either way.
Go ahead, Damon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belabor this, but it feels like it's just a manner, you know, basically in a form and format as prescribed by the electric company. Usable to me, I don't even know what that means. So I think Andy, maybe I'm trying to articulate your point as I heard it, which is, you know, it's probably helpful to the stakeholders, frankly, to have a prescribed form so that they have reassurance that what's received by the utility is in a format that can be translatable by the utility for incorporation, right?
And I don't want to put this on the utilities, but do we want to say in a manner, shall be done in a manner that is, shall be done in a manner as directed by the utilities? But I don't know if that's going to be, that could make things more difficult on stakeholders.
Yeah, and it's, I guess, reading it again, it kind of, you probably don't want to prevent stakeholders from giving data in whatever format is easiest or amenable to them.
Sure.
So maybe it is more of just, again, and you know, we had, I guess this is jumping ahead a bit for the other, like, shall we have a portion of the report that says what feedback was like heard and considered or whatnot. So it's related to other feedback loops, but I'm struggling with the language right now of how you wouldn't want to say you can only give it if it's usable, because then someone might say, well, I only have this one data endpoint, I don't know how to translate it. So I think, like Damon said, that is kind of what the spirit of what I was trying to raise here, but it's admittedly difficult to reflect it in a single reg.
Right. Go ahead, Andrea.
Sorry.
You're fine.
I agree with Damon that usable is ambiguous. And I kind of liked what Damon said, but I don't remember what he said.
I think I just basically said something like in a form and format as, you know, prescribed by an electric company or something like that.
Well, that's what 5 says, and that's it was recommended to be struck, and that's sort of what I was getting at with my earlier edits. Electric companies shall provide the proposed methodology for collecting this data. You know, so I think that
I don't like proposed, John. I'm sorry, I don't like that word. I mean, I think the point is we're just going to provide a form that can be consistently applied by stakeholders to provide us data that can be then used in connection with our planning efforts. I mean, that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, I want to make sure though it's, you know, what the electric companies do is reasonable. Can I put reasonable in there? Provide a reasonable methodology. I know that's a little ambiguous, but to me, you know, if the
you don't want to make it too difficult.
I mean, I may be overreading this, John, honestly, but to me, I think it's just like, what's the form? Like, what's the temp? How are we going to receive information? Yeah. It's not a methodology. It's just like, how does the utility want to receive data? Right. I mean, that's all we're talking about, so that it can so that it can interpret that data and then reflect upon it. Like, that's what we're talking about. Right.
All right. I'm willing. I think these should be in different order, but
all right.
That's what we have. It looks pretty clean.
Why don't we just say, Andrea? Why don't we just say method?
Method for collecting. That's fine, but we got to get rid of the include anything after data, because that's redundant up above. So, and electric company shall provide a method for collecting this data. I think, Damon, you good with that? I'm good.
I'm fine with that. I don't want to, I think we beat this one up a bit. That makes sense to me. I think the point is just like, we all have different systems. We may have a way of, we may have an AI application that takes this all in and somehow, puts it out there. I don't know. We're not that sophisticated, but we all may have a method. So yes, I think that's fine.
Can we change methodology to method? Okay.
All right, let's move on. I don't want to be here past 4. All right. I don't, again, like the sole discretion stuff.
So aren't we, isn't it our business judgment as electric companies to develop the planning inputs and the assumptions? I mean, that's what I understood. The commission was leaving. We're ultimately responsible for this, right? So this is not, we won't accept other inputs, but we're going to ultimately determine the inputs and the assumptions and the develop, and we will develop the forecast scenarios.
I agree that that's consistent with, the fact that, in the end, you bear the responsibility for the plan, but I just feel like it's not needed.
Okay. I just don't want to get in fights over,
Yeah.
we choose certain inputs and people say we should have chosen other inputs and,
That's not going to happen.
I know that we are all just going to say kumbaya.
Especially the first time around.
All right, so I'm accepting a lot of these things.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't say you have to accept all the assumptions. All right, shall publish inputs and assumptions. All right.
This is a staff recommendation.
Samrat?
Correct. It is a staff recommendation. So happy to receive any feedback. We just wanted to highlight that, the inputs and assumptions would be published
Where?
to the commission somehow. I think the electric companies are going to solicit feedback from stakeholders. And as discussed earlier, they're going to provide the methodology, how that information is going to be shared. So just I think it was not very clear the way it was written before that it would be something that would be shared.
I don't know if it is or no.
So it says the company will report. Oh, I see. Electric company shall develop electric system planning inputs and assumptions or develop forecast scenarios and other planning. Identify discrete shall publish inputs. Can we just say the electric company shall provide inputs and assumptions to stakeholders? And then it doesn't, we have some flexibility in how they get it. Publish sounds like we either have to file it or put it on our website or something.
Well, should we, rather than limit it to stakeholders, should it just be parties? I know we talked about parties being earlier as a broader group. Or are you just, are you saying you don't want to have to publish these on, say, your website, for example?
Well, I think we just give the electric companies the discretion on how to get the information to the people who need it.
Sure.
That's all I'm advocating for, because it may be different for each electric company.
No, I get it.
I guess, here's, we've got the stakeholder party thing going on. So I'm not entirely sure, because if parties can provide feedback and only stakeholders can get confidential information, I think we've now added with this party stakeholder thing, like a level of ambiguity and confusion that wasn't there before.
Now, let me go back up to where we had parties. One is engaged, so you want it to be more than just stakeholders.
Yeah, because you don't want to just limit it to people who formally intervene.
Right. And then, but this is now input, so shouldn't that be stakeholders?
Well, are we is this going to be like confidential type information, or?
Probably. I mean, inputs and assumptions for their planning, a lot of the inputs are confidential information. So, I mean, this, again, this is why another reason why the whole idea of giving away confidential information just makes this uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I'm I hear you.
So if we are going to give our inputs and assumptions, I think we have to limit it to stakeholders, because those input and assumptions want confidential information.
I would recommend getting rid of the second sentence here too, because summary, staff said shall provide the following data, but didn't provide a list of the data. So I was assuming you were,
I would also add, John, that that's a level of prescriptiveness that will hinder planning rather than help stakeholders, right? Now you're telling us what our inputs are and what our assumptions are, which are supposed to be our business judgment.
Right. I think there was John, there was something that was deleted that listed the inputs and assumptions that would be provided by the utilities. But I think it was deleted, or I don't know where it is right now, but
yeah,
it was there somewhere.
All right. Well, I must have incorrectly transcribed that.
Well, but I would argue that it shouldn't be there, because this really is the discretion of the commission,
Right.
and the discretion of the utilities, right?
Right. I guess it goes back to the whole transparency discussion about, like what, just providing a list of examples. I don't think it says they shall provide this information. It says kind of provide kind of guidance about the type of information that could be provided by the utilities. I don't think it was, if I remember correctly, it was like prescriptive as to like, this is what should be provided.
So if this says the electric company shall provide inputs and assumptions to stakeholders, we're providing what inputs and assumptions we used. And it doesn't matter what is listed beyond that. We're going to tell you what we used. And if you're going to then tell us what needs to be in there, then you are prescribing how we plan, because we have to include whatever's in that list.
I would say summary, you will have an opportunity as a stakeholder to ask discovery if you think there are things missing that you would like to see in a particular case. So I'm agreeing, and this is really to you, Chuck. I'm agreeing with.
I'm sorry, I had to step away. Dog was barking. Somebody was at the door.
I'm agreeing with Andrea that adding more specificity here to raise problems, and the stakeholders always have the opportunity to ask discovery.
Agreed.
All right.
Dog wants to go out.
All right. This last item was also provided by staff. Summary, you want to speak to
Yes.
it?
So yeah, I remember how the change was made. If you look at 2 that says when available, I think I remember why we added during the whatever phase, what was the phase? The inputs, alignment of inputs and assumptions phase. I think that's, we were just not sure what when available meant. We wanted the inputs to be provided when the inputs and during the alignment of inputs and assumptions phase. So there was like a bunch of multiple rounds of comments, I feel like, and so it just looks a little different. But when the fact that it says when available, D2, we didn't like the when available, I guess, is the first thing. And the second comment is the inputs and stakeholder feedback. So we're going to have an opportunity for stakeholders to provide feedback, and then we wanted kind of as part of the transparency piece, the companies discussed which comments were incorporated, which comments were not incorporated. So consistent with what we have in the later phases of the planning process.
Jacob, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering the conversations around the when available, it was really around trying to recognize that, some of these capabilities, the utilities are going to be kind of in progress of developing. And so recognizing that some of this data may not be available, I guess, for lack of a better term, for the utility to be able to provide, because we're still developing those capabilities. And so I think that was why that was added here, is that recognition that the utilities are going to be continuing to develop and improve the systems to be able to create this data. And so this is the data that we would look to provide when we have it, but recognizing that that may not always be the case. So I think that's why that was added there, if I remember the conversation. And then to the adding to number 4, I think that's already captured under F in terms of what we would be providing from a reporting process in the preliminary plan. So it may just be unnecessary in this step, since it's already captured later in the actual kind of report we'd publish.
Jacob, with 2, I mean, do you have a problem with that list, and maybe just in your report, just saying, B, C, and D not available?
Yeah,
or,
and I think
something like that, and just end it like following data.
Well, let's look at it though. I mean, that's got to be available. Assume adoption rates for technologies used for load and DER forecasting. I guess why wouldn't you have adoption rates in your planning? I really don't understand, why you couldn't do C also. So all these things, I don't understand the when available.
Well, I think trying to recognize that, in terms of forecasting, especially all the different DRs that are available, the systems and tools may not be in place yet for us to, be able to fully forecast and incorporate those into the forecast to that degree.
But then you would say the adoption rate, is 0, for instance, if it wasn't used in the plan. I know when we had the electrification study, they assumed different adoption rates for different technologies, but then there was a big battle over assuming VPP adoption rates, and in the end, it was assumed 0 because we didn't have good enough information. So, in a situation where you really can't plan for something, a technology, then your adoption rate would be 0.
I mean, I guess that's one way that could kind of go about providing that data and just having that as 0.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta have some adoption rates, or else you really can't do forecasting. I really feel like I'm empathetic to your point, but if you haven't factored something into a plan because it's too early, then the adoption rate is 0, and you can just state that. And yeah, you might get feedback from stakeholders that disagree with that, but I think you can make your case.
Sure. And like I said, I think it was this came about, especially the when available, and even the reporting on the development of the systems necessary to provide that data was trying to kind of combine some other points that were there. I think a key point throughout some of the regulation this development was, we report on our progress towards implementing these tools and systems. So I think that was trying to combine that. But to your point, John, if the data isn't available, then maybe it is just a zero. But I think it is good as long as we keep reporting on the development of the systems necessary in there for the utilities to be able to say, why that number may not be zero and what progress they are making towards, improving the systems.
Go ahead, Damon.
Yeah, I guess I'm getting a little confused on this one. So we're already required, the utilities are already required to provide all of the data used in terms of developing its plans. So to the extent any of these points were used in developing plans, it would have already been reported upon. I think that's how I'm reading things. And then I guess the second question is, what data does the commission and or stakeholder group, as part of developing these regulations, want utilities to incorporate either now or going forward? And so it seems like reporting on our progress to develop that data and incorporate into our plans is really what we're heading for here. So I don't want to create confusion, I guess. And it's either use this data in developing your plans, or tell us how you're doing in terms of developing the capabilities to incorporate the data. But we're already required to report on the data that we're actually using. Does that make sense? I mean, I guess I'm just getting a little confused.
Yeah.
That's right.
Report on the development of systems necessary to provide the following data, and we'll provide the following data. 2 just reads funny now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure. Reporting on the systems and then providing the data.
Right.
It's do we just want the data rather than the systems?
I think we're already reporting on all the data that we're actually using to
Right.
build our plans. So like that's already covered.
Right.
And if it happens to include A through E, then it's already going to be reported upon.
Mhm.
It's really about, are there other points that utilities may not have the capabilities to do now, which certainly would include SMECO and some of these, I think. Where are we at in terms of developing that capability, if that's the goal?
Sure. Okay.
So I think those are the points I'm trying to extrapolate.
No, I'm with you. Does it read better now?
I would get rid of A,
I,
because that's redundant with, C.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and maybe you just need a sort of prefatory or additional clause that just said, if the data is not already provided, then we'll report on our progress to develop the systems necessary to provide the data. Because utility may have already provided, one of A through D or one of the items. I guess if we've already provided it, then we don't need to report on again, maybe reading too much into this, but that's sort of the point. We're going to provide whatever we use. And then it's just, what's our progress? To the extent there's an interest in incorporating some of these data points, what's our progress to doing so if we haven't done so already? That's all. And maybe it's just as simple as, to the extent not already provided, the electric company will report on. I don't know.
Research.
Something like that.
Report on the development. Seems reasonable. John, what do you think?
I feel like, there's implementing new systems, but there's also improving existing systems. So can I get improvement in here? Or like this?
Development of and improvement to, I don't know. Andy, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of what Jacob was mentioning. I'm reading back through part 4, D and E for load and DER forecasting, where there is provision to sort of, where it says electric companies, there's some edits we haven't discussed yet, but shall basically report progress towards modernizing those methodologies. And so I agree. I think it's maybe, obviously this may be a persistent feature where sections overlap with respect to like expected reporting, because I know this is like the report section. So maybe it's like there's a planning process and then a report development. Somewhere in between that lives, I think, the feedback loop, which, again, back to our comments for C and D for this section, data collection and aligning inputs and assumptions. The red lines we provided last time sort of had explicit call outs for not just, saying collecting data and then aligning on what data was collected, and those can be construed as assumptions. Maybe what I'm getting at is assumptions might be a vague term if it doesn't explicitly call out like the methodology. So like, let's say from one plan to the next, the utility files their plan, and then in the quote, I know there's a short time frame, but often a plan will be filed and utilities are immediately looking at ways to improve their methodology, and say they move from a top down to a bottom up forecasting method or something. I guess where's the place where that is communicated out in the first data collection? So that was our intent of saying, having some more provisions around what information is shared around, like, here's our new method and here's the data format, or so there's that interplay. I just wanted to raise that. And in addition to what Jacob said, I think I don't have a strong feeling about this one, but I did think the separation of systems, like progress on the systems to do the forecasting, or are we talking about like the forecast of the DER in this 2B right here?
Go ahead, Andrea.
I'm not responding to Andy, so I have something different to ask.
Mine was I didn't have a specific thing, so feel free, Andrea.
Okay. So, and we didn't put this in our edits, but I'm a little confused. This section covers, I think it's 3 different reports. And we are not specific. We say report on, but we're not specific in these where we're actually reporting. It's some, like, B is specific about the update. I think we're kind of specific somewhere about the annual plan, or the plan. But I think we need to be clearer, like, where is this being reported? Because it sounds like right now we're creating a whole new reporting requirement when we already have these 3 defined plans or aspects that or deliverables that we're supposed to be providing. See what I'm saying?
Sure. So like for 2, the electric company will include in its
Right.
DSP an annual update,
Right.
a report of. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, and it goes, and it's not just this one, and I'm sorry I didn't think of it earlier, but I think we need to be, in order to not kind of create challenges where there don't need to be, I think we need to be precise about where we're reporting throughout.
Sure.
4.
No, I'm with you. That makes sense.
Well, the thing is, there's an electric system plan, and then there's an annual electric system planning update. But, in a year that the company is going to be doing its electric system plan, they're also going to be providing an annual update to some extent, except it's just going to be, their plan. But there should be things that are done annually.
Right. Yeah, I think Andrew's agreeing with you there. It's just the way that read it could be interpreted as like, oh no, there needs to be a separate, distinct report.
Right. That's right. I just want to make sure. I mean, I just would prefer to say where we're reporting it in the plan. That's all I'm saying, so that it's clear we're not creating a new reporting venue for this stuff.
Right. Go ahead, JB.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I think in again, to avoid some of that duplication, instead of if this number 2 here is supposed to be talking about the utilities reporting on just like progress in improving our systems and how we're doing that, I think it makes sense to have that captured instead, where we're talking about the reports versus here. And I think it's even already captured there. If like you scroll back up to the very beginning, John, where you're talking about, what the utility is right under B, I think. to me, some of that really fits into that 1B
Yeah.
of describing existing processes, current capabilities, and plans for future improvements. So I think that's, if that's what we're talking about in that 2 later on, that's already kind of captured under that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So really, we should be getting rid of this whole thing here.
Any objection to that? All right. All right, alignments. All right. Go ahead,
And
Sandra.
I don't-
Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm
Andrew.
sorry, go ahead. Nope.
Hey, John, so I missed the part where it was written before.
It was in B.
B.
B is in Bravo. There you go.
Right. But I thought, the whole data input discussion is about it's about the first stage of the JADE process where the companies would share the specific, like the DER forecast, like the different inputs. I thought that was like a more on capabilities that would, they would implement in the future.
Well, we're at the point where we're talking about aligning inputs and assumptions. I don't know that that really gets into capabilities here.
Right. But I think the one I just saw in B talked about capabilities, I think.
Yes.
Narrative about capabilities. But in the data collection phase, what we wanted to see was policies that were incorporated or considered in the design of the plan, and any considerations, any inputs, right? It wasn't so much about the capabilities. So I was like a little confused.
Well, I'm confused now because here we're talking about future improvements. So I've just lifted it. There could be improvements in forecasting, etc. I don't know if we need to get this specific, but I didn't want to lose that. So, but here we're just talking about the plan.
Right. All right. All right. So if I have any comments, I'll get back to you on it.
And I wanted to use the same wording that we used in C. For here. Oh, no, we can't. I'm sorry, I screwed that up. Let's use.
All right. Andrew, do you have a question or a comment? Andrew, if you're talking, you're muted.
Thank you. You'd think I wouldn't do that anymore after years of this. So back to 3, what is now 3. This feedback is going to come out in our annual updates and plans, isn't it? So I'm not.
Yeah,
sure.
we haven't gotten to that part yet. Jacob mentioned it was further down.
So are we going to take 3 out then?
Yeah, we just haven't gotten to it yet. I've still been wrestling with 1 and 2.
Appreciate it.
But I do think 3 will go. Just want to confirm where it's at because we don't want to have duplication.
Tamara, go ahead.
So, John, so I'm assuming there are multiple phases for stakeholder feedback. So this is the first phase in the JADE process roadmap. And so this is one phase where there would be some stakeholder input opportunity. And then the later phases, I felt like it was going to be on the plan, the
Right.
preliminary plan, and then the plan itself. In the work group discussions, we had a discussion where there would be an opportunity for stakeholder feedback right after the inputs and assumptions and scenarios phase, right before the running of the analysis. So that's where
Right, and I think we got to put a discrete point back in here. It may have been deleted in one of the earlier deletions, but
I think it's there at the end of D, John. Identify a discrete point.
yeah,
for
okay, there it is. Okay. So it is there. This is the second discrete point. The first is with the data collection. This is the second.
Right, but what does that mean? What does I think it's not very clear what the companies do with the stakeholder feedback. I think part of in our discussion with DOE and some guidance we got, what does that mean? I think we provided that feedback early on. What does the electric companies do with the feedback? So that's why we added 3 in the different phases.
Yeah, but all right, let's go to 3 because I think Jacob was okay. Is this where you were referring to, Jacob?
No, I think it's in F.
F.
Yeah, under F1 in terms of what we're publishing within
There
the
we go.
preliminary plan, and then I think
Lessons learned, narrative.
FE specifically, or at least on the version I have, so it might be on the next page. It says summary of feedback received in step C and
Okay,
D.
so it's
right?
all that's
Yeah.
very
So
good.
that's where it's capturing that, like, as we publish this, we would provide, what feedback we'd received from stakeholders, and then, what responses we may have as well.
All right, so I agree. I've been, Chuck, with your permission, I'd like to delete it here because it is covered there. It says C and D. This is D.
Agreed. Right.
I don't know that we need 2 here. I think we need to just say something like the electric company shall consider feedback from stakeholders. Or shall accept, or something to that effect, because this seems like an open-ended loop here, whereas you're having a discrete point to provide feedback. You say to the in fact, I don't even know why you need 1 and 2. I think if you just got rid of 1 and 2, it might be clearer. Because you're saying, they're going to socialize their inputs and assumptions, and they're going to give, stakeholders an opportunity to provide feedback. So why do you need 1 and 2?
Yeah.
We would agree with that, John.
All right. Making it shorter.
All right, so let's go back up. Close the loop on this. Do we need any of this stuff here? Because here's where we talked about future
Right.
improvements, so that's why I lifted some of that here.
I would say it's already incorporated in B. I mean, main B, not sub point B, whatever, B above.
Yeah. All right. I think simpler is better because, you know, let's face it, as soon as we go through one cycle, we're going to learn everything we need to do to update the regs. So, all right, so we're on run analysis. That should be simple.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure, since we cut down, it seems like a lot of section D, some of the detail around, because I think earlier on part C, when we were discussing alignment or consideration of the FERC 1920, like inputs, assumptions, and solutions meeting sequence, and we sort of said, well, it seems like we have 3 points of stakeholder. I guess, are we saying it's, I'm wondering when we say provide, where does it say? So basically this one says electric companies shall develop these inputs and assumptions or the forecast scenarios or other criteria and identify a place to provide feedback. But I guess that's, to me now, pretty bare bones. Like, what is the vehicle mechanism or otherwise where utilities will share out their inputs and assumption alignment? Is it just in the preliminary plan?
Well, no, that's what, you know, you have, this is a discrete point after they have their assumptions. You have a second point, or the first point really, is where they're, you know, talking about the data and data sources. Now you're talking about the assumptions. And then they run the analysis. And the third point is really at the annual technical conference where you're talking about the solutions.
Right. Andy, are you looking more for like how they're going to provide that feedback?
Yeah, it's more,
Okay.
I understand, like saying it'll be
Okay.
different how stakeholders can
Okay.
provide
Sure.
feedback
Sure.
to the assumptions, but
Right.
how do they learn about them?
Right. Okay. So maybe it should be identify. I'm sorry. Can you go back down, John, to D? A discrete point for stakeholders to provide feedback and disclose the methodology on how to provide that feedback. I don't know. I'm thinking off the top of my head. Go ahead, Andrea.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say that every utility is going to do it differently. And I mean, if we're soliciting feedback, we're going to let them know we're soliciting feedback, whatever form that takes. If part of our requirement is to solicit feedback, I mean, yeah, to solicit feedback and to respond, which is in the regulations below, I think it was, or maybe it's above, maybe it was in B, then we have to solicit it. So it doesn't really, to me, it doesn't really matter what form. We may all do it differently, but we got to go out and get it, or else we're violating the regulations, right? Am I making any sense?
No, I get what you're saying. I think Andy's more concerned about how the feedback is going to be provided to stakeholders. Is that right, Andy?
How the alignment of the steps, the data that was collected in step C, plus, you know, I'll add, you know, a fair amount of other utility collected data on their own input assumptions, because stakeholders are not going to be providing input relative to the utility's own asset base or their internal data. And then I thought the function of this one was the alignment part is the key word for me, is like, I guess there needs to be a presumption or a presentation or some method of the utility saying, here's not necessarily, I guess, because I understand in part F, we're saying, okay, here's all the feedback we collected in these various venues, and then here's, you know, how we respond to that. So, but sort of saying for each of the plan sections that you're aligning key inputs and assumptions of, I just see how it's like you could just send an email and say, hey, we did this. Anybody have any feedback? Not that you would, but it's just in terms of being rigorous and having it expected here in the regs. I just see it as, you know, again, that's part of why we added the sort of publicly noticed forum in our recommendation last time, but that was not adopted in here, and we understand that. But just wanted to leave it and see if other stakeholders here in the call had any thoughts on this. I might be making it too big a deal, but
I realize every company's going to want to do things a little bit differently, but I don't understand why we can't just say these discrete points have to be meetings. You know, and leave it at that. I don't know why we are afraid of that specificity. Because in a meeting, there's an opportunity to go back and forth, whereas, you know, if you just say discrete point to somebody else's comment earlier, it could, you know, it's just an email. Or do you just file something in the docket associated with your company? You know, I really feel like, you know, the key really here is to have a two-way conversation at these, you know, points where feedback is being solicited.
Go ahead, Samrat.
I would agree with Andy and John. I think the alignment piece is not there. I think it's more inputs and assumptions and feedback. So I think I would be supportive. I think staff would be supportive of like a meeting or a forum or something in the alignment and inputs assumption description there that the stakeholder feedback is considered somehow, and there's kind of some leads to some alignment.
Go ahead, Damon.
Yeah, I've said this before, but I still reflect upon the Empower process. And I think, you know, the notion of a meeting is consistent with that process, which is a forum for stakeholders to present out to the utilities on their thoughts and feedback as to what they think should be incorporated into the plan. And then the utilities take that feedback and reflect upon it and ultimately report out on whether it was included or not. So, I mean, I keep coming back to that process because I think it's a good model that's been time tested. And so I think to the extent we reflect that here in the regulation, something similar, we don't have a problem with that, if that makes sense.
All right. So all I added was discrete meeting point, and I added it up here to under C, a discrete meeting point. So can we all just agree that these are going to be meetings?
I mean, I think that's certainly at least what the commission was driving towards with the reference to the FERC order.
Right.
I mean, I think we could probably fight about that later. But I certainly don't think the commission just wants a big email blast and say, let us know what you think.
All right, can we move on? F.
Hey, John and Chuck, real quick. I think in D there was an ampersand. And I don't, yeah, can we say alignment, inputs, and assumptions? Just, I don't think in a legal document, ampersand. It's the ampersand where I'm having a try. It's really silly. Legal document shouldn't be having an ampersand.
Sure, it's still written. Do you still want it to read align?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I wasn't clear.
There you go.
Actually, I was ashamed to admit it, but I was struggling with what's an ampersand. But anyway.
Sorry.
That's the sad thing about being a lawyer. We spend all that time with that kind of stuff.
All right. I personally, in this one, I don't know why we need to, you know, we're talking about regulation F1. I don't know why we need to say it again, but.
Yeah, I have to say, I think I was the one who added that, and I'm not quite sure why. So I'm good with.
Yeah, if we define it, if it's defined, it's defined.
Yep.
So here we have another discrete point. So this is the third discrete point, but really, I thought that was the annual technical conference.
Is that the preliminary electric system plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, John, if that was just kind of carryover from, like I said before, some of the original straw proposal language before the commission defined the technical conference. we had always planned a stakeholder engagement point at this. So that could just be carryover language.
So I'm just going to say, and to make sure it's clear, so that we don't bring it up again, that where we're going to provide this feedback. Is that okay?
Provide the preliminaries for stakeholders.
In fact, I think it should say,
It's very wordy. I don't think it needs to be that bad. We'll provide preliminary at an annual technical conference. Go ahead, Samrit.
Right. Does it have to be in the annual technical conference? I would assume that the commission would issue a notice where stakeholders would provide feedback
Yeah.
prior to the annual conference. Yeah.
well, we had an annual conference somewhere. There it is. Okay. So,
And that talks
well, we're
about
just saying provide preliminary, shall provide their plan, and they shall include in their plan these things. So,
all right.
I guess I'm okay until we get to this point. I don't know why we would strike that. Let's go into your other comments.
Describing the data used, inputs, and assumed adoption rates. Is it just too specific, or?
No,
I mean, I don't know. I'm just.
yeah, I think that, well, maybe that's already covered in the assumptions, but
Yeah, I guess this was, I think, sorry, Sam.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Okay. I think we just thought this was redundant.
well, yeah, well, we took it out earlier, so it's no longer redundant, I guess.
Oh. Okay. Well, but, I mean, obviously we're going to provide that information. I just don't, we're trying to kind of reduce redundancy. So if it's no longer redundant, then we can keep it in.
All right. So what's the problem with summarizing stakeholder engagement?
We've already.
Oh, is
Yeah,
that okay.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
recommend getting rid of that.
All right. My apology. I apologize. Oh, there you go. Summary of feedback.
And the including is just unnecessary. We're going to have to respond to the feedback, whatever that feedback is.
All right. I think this was covered in the granularity.
Right. John, did you mean to delete it, or I think?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with deleting it because I think we covered this in the granularity part in 03.
No. The one about stakeholder feedback that were heard but not implemented. I think we deleted it from.
Yeah, because I think that was part of and Jacob probably can point me better to where it's at. It's somewhere else in here.
I think. Oh, go ahead, Jacob.
Andrea.
It's Andrea. I just, that one, we struck that one because we're going to have to provide feedback whether we implemented it or not, right? The whole point of feedback is we're going to have to talk about all the feedback. So that's just redundant, that including data input, that's redundant to the first part of F. It's unnecessary because we have to provide feedback we have to respond to all the feedback we get.
Go ahead, Samrit.
Right. I am interested in keeping it. I would be okay with including data inputs and feedback in data inputs, but I think we deleted it from above. I think Jacob indicated it was included here in F. So include just specifying that feedback that were heard but not implemented. We would like that to be part of it.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, I guess my point is not that it was above or not. The meaning of F, the first part of F, includes that proviso. So we have to provide responses to all feedback. So saying feedback that were heard but not implemented is already included in F without that proviso. That's why we got rid of it, because it's redundant. It's already going to be captured in what we have to do.
Right. I just didn't. Can you point me to where it says all feedback?
Yeah. So in F, in E, sorry.
Right where you were at, John.
Yeah, I'm confused myself.
So I think, Andrea, what you're saying is right. Of 1E says, we have to respond to the feedback received. And so feedback received is inclusive of all feedback, right? And so whether it was incorporated or not. And so I think that's where we are saying ending the sentence at regulation is still all encompassing of what we're responsible for responding to. Is that right, Andrea?
That's exactly what I was trying to say. And I was citing, I'm so sorry. Like my notes over here are in a different, they had it as F and not E. So I injected a lot of confusion there. So thank you, Jacob, for being clear.
Right. Okay. Can we say all feedback received in? Then I would be okay with deleting, including data inputs, and just say all feedback, response to all feedback received.
Yeah, I guess we can. I think it's a given. I mean, if we start cherry picking feedback, somebody's going to come after.
It's up to you, Chuck.
Yeah, no, I think we're good that way, because I know Ethan had expressed some concerns about addressing all feedback, because I guess there's a tendency to get some things that are just kind of off the wall.
All right, can we go to F? I'm agreeing with deleting this, because I do think in the granularity, we already talked about this.
All right. Yep. No objection. Hearing none. Better do or change.
I do agree that I have changed. It's redundant.
I agree. Our relationship.
Okay, Samra, you want to speak to this?
I think we just added interrelationship. Paul, are you available? Do you want to provide some color to this? Okay. Looks like Paul is not. Oh, you're here. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we just changed the word interrelation to interrelationship from, I think it was interaction before.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, I mean, again, back to we're supposed to be able to act on these regulations, and this is very ambiguous. I don't know how we don't understand what this is supposed to mean. So either we need to clarify it or get rid of it, because we can't act on that.
What this is speaking to, or intended to speak to, is to the extent that there's prospective solutions being proposed under the plan, that those solutions would be the other benefits or programs that they're tied to. For example, if there's a solution that also relates to reliability or resilience or has some additional benefits, that would be referenced, or if there are other interrelated projects. For example, if there's something related to grid modernization on operational technology that has some dependency on a physical investment that may be identified, then there's some reference that's being that's mentioned, so there's some context for how what may be proposed relates to some other aspects that are being proposed by the utility.
So I know Damon just put his hand up. Can I just say something real quick before?
Please.
So I think we're getting beyond distribution system planning. I mean, there are going to be reliability report. Like this is where we get into all sorts of other reporting that we do. This should really be focused on the capacity planning, which is, what these solutions are for, is capacity planning. And if we get starting to report on all sorts of other stuff, and maybe they generally do have some other benefits. But I think it's getting outside of the planning process.
It's not intended to be additional reporting. It's basically just pointing out that this also is related to, some other activity that has been identified. So it's just helping provide context for how, what's being proposed is not it's not redundant, or, let me back up. It's basically helping to identify how this ties to other elements that are being proposed in other reporting, but not to create a separate report. Plus, there's a requirement about prioritization and also multiple benefit identification as part of the cost benefit analysis. So this just ties to that.
Well, I'll let Damon go because I've taken up his time, and then I'll come back after him.
Thanks, Andrea. And actually, I was going to just agree with you in the sense that this is confusing to me, and I don't think it's necessary. Look, the reporting is the starting point. It's the bread and butter. We all know that the discovery process is going to flush out a lot of the details. So to the extent that a stakeholder wants to ask a question like, how does a utility's plan to rebuild feeder X relate to Empower Maryland, or something like that? By all means, I'm sure that question will be asked, but this is confusing. I just don't think it's necessary. I'll leave it at that.
Go ahead, Andy. Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I'm just, I guess I'm a little surprised. It's, utilities in other jurisdictions, do this on a regular basis and have for several years. So,
go ahead, Andy.
Thanks. I'm trying to find the reference, but maybe, jumping ahead to some of or at least one of the edits I saw in I forget if it's section 2, 1 or 3. The applicability section. Just wanted to comment. I agree with Paul and staff's sort of assertion that this should be called out, and we can maybe discuss when and where and how. But if we remove it here and then coupling that with what I see as the recommended deletion of reference to transmission, and just sort of trying to insert language that these are only distribution needs, when I think there was discussion about the legislation that sort of broadened the scope to electric system plan. I think there's, as one example, I know Paul mentioned other examples of programs like reliability or resilience, and I would just add transmission as a very pertinent relationship there, especially because of the interdependency of what happens on the distribution system and how it influences eventual transmission needs. And we're seeing this all around the country with especially new large data center loads that are coming in and looking for places to interconnect. And often the DER nature, or sort of the distributed nature of whether it's energy efficiency, demand response, front of the meter, solar plus storage, all of those sort of non-wire solutions don't often get, I guess, the same level of rigor and stakeholder transparency at the FERC level. And so just sort of saying, well, this is already either PJM or FERC jurisdiction, I think misses the point. It's more that integrated and holistic planning needs to consider these in sequence or in the same sort of planning process. And obviously that's not all going to happen right at once, but I think towards an expectation and evolution that there's more and more relationship between those two, I think is useful and should be included.
I think it's already included though. I'm highlighting what you all have to do and I know there's some changes recommended with this, but we already have a framework that we have to report on projects in our plan that are designed to promote the policy goals, which include resilience, which include reliability, which include energy efficiency, which include load flexibility, and any other number of goals, including goals that can be proposed by the commission, like resource adequacy, would while I don't think that's directly in PUA 7802, I think it is something that is a goal. Actually, it's in the new legislation that's come out in bill. I think it's a Senate bill 937 states that resource adequacy is a goal. So I think that we could trip over ourselves with all these things, but in the end, I do think there needs to be an accounting here. How what's in the plan affects state policy goals, which should cover us for a number of these things. That if I go back up to where we were, if I can ever find that again.
Right there.
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of feel like it's covered.
Go ahead, Simran.
John, I think the section you went to is regarding the annual report. I think this is regarding the preliminary plan and then about the solutions discussion.
Yeah.
But wouldn't those projects be included already?
Here it's an addition that you made, Samri.
It's the same thing, John.
Yeah, so which is in this section. So I think we can figure out the best way to handle it. It should be in a preliminary plan. And I thought that I saw an Exelon recommendation, because I had asked Exelon to think about how we were going to combine some of these things. Because and I'm a little confused because I thought Exelon had taken this out, or recommended moving this, but I don't see it being moved here. Maybe that's my footnote.
We did take that out.
Yeah. So it says for discussion, MJU shall consider incorporating this into the preliminary system plan, which is the item we're talking about. So. I still want to get this stuff in the template, but if it sounds like we're all pointing to the same thing, just using different words. So,
so John, I'm sorry, the one you just said we took out.
Yeah.
Since it wasn't marked here, the reason we took it out is because it was in the annual Maryland General Assembly report, and the commission, in our minds, the commission has electric system plan and annual electric system plan updates to rely on. We shouldn't have to do yet another report.
Yeah,
on or before November.
But what I object to with your proposal is that you're throwing it on the commission and staff to just call through your report to figure out what the report to the MGA, where we already agreed on a template of how you all would report that. And I don't want to lose that template, so I don't care if you want to take it out of November 1st, put it in
I
the
think she agrees.
preliminary.
She agrees with you.
Okay, I'm not saying it because I'm on a different slide, but the template is the important thing. Because generally staff should just be able to take your template and forward it to the MGA. So Samri, would you agree if I just lifted some of that work, meaning take it out of here, and then where you got here, sort of just paste, and we can get rid of the on before.
So the question is that the annual updates would occur on November 1st instead
No,
of.
no, they're in the preliminary. Yeah, because this doesn't include the annual update.
Yeah, no, that'd be,
Preliminary.
Yeah, it's in your preliminary plan, but not your annual update. So I don't know.
the annual update would have to be before the technical conference.
Yeah.
Ethan, did you want to jump in, sir? If you're-
I'll jump in to say.
Sorry, hot mic moment.
It's okay.
I know we were trying to say, well, should it be in the preliminary plan because that's what F is or not? Section B of or point B of the section 4 of the regulations talks about what those broad things that the utilities would talk through every year, right? The lessons learned, narrative, summary, narrative of like improvements, all those different things that would be talked through either in an annual update or the full preliminary plan. So that may be where, if we want to move the kind of, as of now, November filing, General Assembly report somewhere, it could go here to reflect that it would have to be kind of both in an annual update or in a preliminary plan.
So here's what I added F here. Oh, I went too far. Would you agree with adding F here?
Can I just clarify, John, is this saying that all annual reports, I'm sorry, electric distribution reports or annual reports will be in this format? Is that what that's telling us to do? Or is this like something separate within a report?
It's something separate because it's a template from each company with how, and it's required by statute.
Mm-hmm.
Describing, how their projects are designed to promote state policy goals. So we did this for the first time last year. And it was very important to have a template because really the commission just takes your templates and appends it to, a very short introduction and just sends it off to the MGA. And I think we made a few small edits, to the template information, but again, this is already required. So I think that the ask at the last meeting was for the utilities to consider, maybe making this part of your, reporting, because it just seems like the timing of it would be better, to have this, with like an annual update. So if it's here, it doesn't need to be in these two other places, if we can all agree to put it here. It's got to be somewhere.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say we can agree with adding it there, John.
Okay.
And would staff agree with adding it here?
So John, I'm a little unclear. Maybe you can help me. So the annual update is about at least to the General Assembly, is about what the companies implemented during the year to promote state policy goals. So if this is filed in, is looking at the preliminary plan that Exelon distributed, if it's filed at sometime in June, that would leave like a whole half year, 6 months to accomplish something. So am I misunderstanding that that's the intent? So the annual staff's, the commission's report to the General Assembly is supposed to include what the companies implemented during the year,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
I mean, the way I read this is now the utilities are going to have to include in their annual plan the report to the General Assembly. Is that?
Well,
I'm just confused by putting it there. I thought it made more sense elsewhere, but that's just me.
I think
Right. Go
the
ahead.
key thing is the current status, and that's probably what the legislative wording says.
I think it'll probably only end up being maybe a few months versus maybe like six months, right? If I think the most recent update from the commission was utilities have to file it by November 1st going forward, right? So if we're putting this report together in the September-October timeframe, if we're filing it in June, it's really, I guess, only maybe a quarter of the year that there's a gap on, but obviously, as we start to do this annually, I think we would be thinking about speaking to it based on what has happened since the last report. And so I think that information still may be captured, but just maybe on a slight time shift. But I think the idea being is if we can consolidate this into some of the reporting within the annual updates or the preliminary plans, or just create some of the efficiencies from a resource perspective in terms of pulling that together. So that's just initial thought. I see Ethan has his hand up, so I'll pass it or defer to him for anything else.
Go ahead, Ethan.
I just wanted to concur with Jacob, and if I have a report due in November 1st, I'm going to start the process of getting it done in July, and we're going to have to pick a cutoff date not long after that. For we can't keep changing data right up until the filing date. We have to pick a day, October 1, where that's where we consider the end of the data as a hypothetical. That's just how this kind of reporting works. You're always going to be time shifted a little backwards, and because you've got to get the reports going early and then choose at what point you choose a cutoff. So concurring with Jacob.
All right, thank you, sir. Go ahead, Samar.
Right. So I think staff doesn't really mind. We don't really mind having that here. But like, John pointed out, it talked about current status of projects. So maybe we could add in something in section C that says, any updates to the annual, if there are any updates, the company should provide by November 1st, something like that would capture any additional updates that might have happened since the June update.
So that's handled here. So you would have to make something
Right.
here.
Right. So if there are any updates since the June filing, as Ethan said, if there possibly no updates, then we would take the June filing. But if there are any updates the companies could provide by the November 1st deadline.
And I would say material. I know that's an ambiguous word, but
Material updates from their annual reports or plans.
I'm still working on, to project status reported pursuant to regulation.04B, and I forget what the actual number was. So just leave it at that.
That sounds good.
What number did I have, so I can get the right number? It's in B1F. So and I'll sync that up later. All right.
Go ahead, Damon.
So I'll probably open a can of worms here, but John already opened the door, so I'll do so. But House Bill 1037. So I don't have an answer other than just to at least put out the problem statement and the opportunity, which is we're going to have this new strategic energy planning office, assuming that the governor signs on the bill. And it did pass both chambers. And so when we think about reporting, whether it's the annual reporting or otherwise, that office is also going to be responsible for certain reporting. And so I just think we want to be mindful of synergies, at least from SPECO's perspective. Resource availability in the true sense of the word is a real concern for us, and the ability to collect all this data. So we want to be able to not have 15 reports if we can do it in one, or at least make sure that we're maximizing the value of a report or a data production. And so I just want to make sure we're all thinking about that, because it seems like as we're going through these sections, there's going to be some natural overlap with what that new office will be doing. And so just being mindful of that. Again, John, you mentioned it, so I'm just carrying forward.
Yeah, I don't even know. I noticed that the legislation originally had it in the PSC, but now it's not in the PSC. It's like a separate organization.
Right.
So
that's going to take some time to stand up as well.
It will.
Yeah. But I get the point.
There's an old joke that if you want to get the horse to run faster, you add more riders with whips. Anyway, I'm sorry that's going to be on tape. But in any case, all right. Yeah, I do think that you make a good point, but we're going to figure that out quickly. I think once this thing gets stood up. So I'm like trying to find my way back to where I was.
I think you're past it. Go back.
Yeah.
Why don't we try and finish up 4, now we can break for lunch.
Yeah. So I'd like to get rid of this. And since we covered this earlier in the annual update, get rid of this. So we need to just deal with some of the other edits here.
Perspective. All right. I think those are Exelon edits. Do we have any big concerns about those?
Oh, I did the wrong thing there. I think we already covered this.
Did we? Okay.
Sort of added.
Don't want to assume.
I don't have a problem. I would recommend you accept at least H.
Right. Yeah, I was just throwing it out there. I don't know if anybody else has any heartburn over it.
Delete the footnotes later.
How the perspective solutions contribute.
So this was covered. How the perspective solutions. Well, maybe not, because this is preliminary electric system plan, but I got to go back up to B and remember what we said in B. Okay, B is electric system plan development in addition to annual update. So I think this is covered with.
Yeah, I
the-
thought I saw something about constraints up there. Goals and objectives.
We were just trying to make the language clearer here. I don't think we took out anything real substantive.
Yeah. But the 7802 stuff is covered up here.
You're right.
And so I don't know why we would need to cover it here or just get rid of this whole thing.
We'd be good with that, John.
Go ahead, Samrat.
Hey, John, where was it covered? I'm sorry.
What's that?
I think he said it was covered in B.
All right, let me go back and take a look. John, I just didn't see where it was. Like,
Right here. See, it's electric system plan development and plan update. So we're saying state policy goals identified in state 7802, so we don't have to say it again. Down here.
Yeah, because it says current status of projects.
Yeah.
They're gonna meet those goals.
I'm going to move on since I want to get to lunch eventually. And Chuck won't let us go to lunch until we're done pork.
Yeah, let's just, I figure we get through this section. That'll be a good
Yeah.
stopping point. All right, subscription. All right, any?
Can we scroll up just to what's the heading? I'm trying to understand what the heading here is.
Provide a electric system plan.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Description, final methodology, input, and results of the study.
Yeah, we had raised what study results. So this is ambiguous. What are the results of what study?
Should it just be analysis?
Yeah, I just let's be consistent with what we said earlier. The analysis under here.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yep. We're good with that then.
Okay.
All right. Someone from Exelon want to talk us through this change.
Yeah, so we thought this was unnecessary because you're already reporting locational value for each. So then saying minimum value for potential or avoided, I mean, the locational values can be the locational value.
Okay.
It
And
just
it
seems,
intrinsically has to avoid.
yeah,
That is built into it. It's not that a
I don't
minimum.
like the as feasible
where you begin.
word, but I agree that not everybody's going to be able to do this.
Okay. Electric system planning is discussed.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the as feasible, there's sort of already that provision that if somebody doesn't have ability to do it, they can ask for an exemption. And I would say since locational value study is a core component of section 4, to say it here as like, well, there's all this stuff that's implicit in locational value, but then it's only when feasible, then that maybe isn't necessary.
Okay. Damon, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I think the as feasible is very necessary here. We can't do this. And as I've articulated before, the notion of a waiver is really not a process we should be forced to do, and the legislation is very clear that the rules should reflect the differences. And we're going to provide some feedback to that. But I think as feasible is important here. And something that's not feasible today may become feasible in the future. And to the extent we're going to report out on capabilities as they develop, we will do so. But I think that's important.
Yeah, so you don't want to essentially get a waiver for, like, for example, 20 different things that SMECO doesn't have the current technology to do, correct? Is that kind of what you're envisioning?
That's right. I mean,
Okay.
we'll report out as we are able to develop, the goals here. But right now we cannot do that. And so I think as feasible is reasonable.
Understood. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I was just going to say it will become administratively burdensome for you all because, for instance, on this one, we can't do it right now either. So, you're going to get waivers from everybody until we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And if I may be a tiny bit pedantic, just let's when we talk about locational value, think of it as analysis or framework. A study indicates that it would be a one-time deal, and because the system is evolving continuously, locational values, you need a methodology that you apply on a on a regular basis.
All right. I would suggest we move on. I would like to just leave it in there because I think, although I don't like it personally, I do understand.
Yeah, we can argue about it later.
Yeah.
We shall incorporate or respond to all. Don't we already have that somewhere? Oh, that's setting up specific days though.
I think
Now, this is for utilities.
Yeah.
Aren't we defining all the timelines separately?
We were defining them in the
In that
right
spreadsheet?
here. And well, no, we were using that spreadsheet to kind of help us figure out what these days should be.
And one of the things I will say about this is if we are responding to feedback in a plan, it should be incorporated into the plan and it shouldn't have its own time frame, right? So I'm not sure how, like most of our feedback is incorporated into our plans. Oh no, I guess there is one feedback input that is not part of a plan. Within subsequent. Yeah, like, this I'm sorry. I don't think we saw this one. So I'm not sure we're ready to answer on this. Can we maybe take that back? I'm sorry to not be fully prepared on this.
Yeah, we only have one more shot at this though. So what I'm going to do is accept this for now. And all these timelines, we really need to nail down. Cannot follow these regs without, having some timelines nailed down.
And I would just suggest that we incorporate this into the timeline discussion because the whole, all those timelines become very important in us being able to perform our planning. So if we're going to keep it in, we'll look at it, but if we are going to keep it in, then it has to be put into that timeline so we can figure out what the appropriate timing is and that it doesn't upset the planning process.
These two are duplicative, so we need them.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh yeah, that's right.
We'll see. within subsequent 60 days, including.
They both say the same thing, but one is more specific.
Yeah, C is a little more descriptive.
So
I'm sure the utilities like D, but I think C is probably a better one.
what do you think, Chuck?
I think the utilities probably like D, but I think C is a little more
All right.
descriptive. But then again, that's just me.
But
Andrea indicates he needs a soak with it, so.
yeah, well, that you need, so I would say that everything beyond 60 days is unnecessary, just for the same reasons we've discussed before. And then you're back to what D was.
Haven't we already talked about this too somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is duplicative of the main point in C. It's also duplicative of other points we've already made. So that's like, we're trying to like make sure these regulations are really crisp and
It's here.
Or it's the one below. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it wouldn't be a summary for this spot. It would just be
it's your response.
feedback. But yeah, as I think the language would want to be consistent with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is completely redundant of what we've talked about before. And we already have kind of a set process above for those.
Did we cover A and B? I can't recall.
I don't think so, because I think it's unique here because it's around actually filing the comments and everything.
So we'll leave this in. And all right, annual technical conference. Hey, we didn't have any comments on that. Commission order. I don't think we can put shall in here. We had this issue before with the energy storage regulations because the commission doesn't regulate itself. So may is more appropriate.
Does that mean we have to wonder whether or not they're going to issue an order and we're going to have to wait? I mean, so that's what I'm like, either the process should be they eventually put out an order or they don't, because otherwise we're just sitting there wondering if they're ever going to put out an order and it stops our planning process.
Yeah, I feel like you will get an order, but I don't think you can put regulatory language in that says the commission shall do things.
So is there some way that the commission can, I mean, in its order, can it tell us that it, I'm really worried because this is such a time dependent process and we've already added in a bunch of things that are actually extending our process. If we're stuck waiting to see if there's an order and an order never comes, we can't move, we're stuck. So if we never have any understanding that there's going to be an order or not an order, then our process is really going to be messed up.
Well, you can argue that point with the commission, but you were there at the hearing on energy storage, and just
yeah, but that one, John, was putting a time limit on it. It wasn't whether or not they were going to issue an order. I thought that was a little bit different. I appreciate and remember what you're saying, what you're talking about. I just thought in those regulations, they were trying to kind of cabin in the commission and say, you'll give us an order in such and such number of days.
Chuck, what do you think?
I don't know. First, but I see what you're saying, but I appreciate Andrea's point as well. Go ahead, Damon. I mean, I just don't know. I mean,
I think we need something here to provide a timeline. And it could be as simple as, absent direction from the commission to the contrary, the utilities shall shall proceed with their plans, should be able to, move forward with their plans or something like that. But there has to be a line in the sand. There has to be a point of demarcation so that we can move forward. Otherwise, everything will come to a standstill. We won't be able to order long lead materials, and we'll have real problems. So there has to be something.
Right, and the commission's not approving the plans. So, yeah, maybe something like that, like Damon suggested, would work.
So if they're not approving, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. If the commission isn't approving the plan, then why don't we just get rid of that altogether? And then there's no issue. I mean, because
Yeah, I don't know.
Right. if they're not gonna be,
They're not approving the plans.
because this right here reads like they are.
I'm recommending something along with David. So this is under commission order, absent a commission order within 60 days of an annual technical conference, a utility shall proceed with its electric system plan as
Get rid of the extra utility in there.
Can we add that?
Absent a commission order providing, different direction or alternative directions or something, the point being the commission can of course act as it deems appropriate, but hearing nothing, we're going to move forward as planned.
Yeah, and can we just add that 60 days into our timeline discussion? Again, timing matters for us in our planning, and I just want
it says 60 days. Where else should I put it?
No, I'm sorry.
No, just when
No,
we
we're
talk
talking
about the timeline.
Yeah, that side.
Oh, that Excel
timeline.
spreadsheet.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you guys could do that. I'm letting you guys control that spreadsheet
Okay.
for the timeline because, but yeah, it should be in there.
Thanks.
All right. So absent a commission order within 60 days of an annual technical conference, I think, Damon, you wanted to add some other wording here with alternative direction or
Something, just providing, whatever. It may be fine as it is, but the point is that
let's just say further direction.
something like that, that's fine.
Go ahead, Andy.
Just wanted to call out on the second clause of this now, or what was after that comma, but just the second portion of the sentence now. I would want to caution against leaving as is, just because it might give the presumption that when we say proceed to implement with it, or proceed to implement the plan, that like if there's an absence of a commission order, I think I heard Damon mention like long lead time investments for, substation transformers and things like that. And I think we're getting into an epistemological circle when we sort of say, well, there was discussion and debate that was not resolved around should we do an acknowledgement or some formal approval and like proceeding with this whole DSP or the plan, the electric system plan itself. And then that was sort of shelved for the time. And then there was language in here about the technical conference comment. And I guess if it's watered down more than that, not watered down, it's the wrong word. I mean, I understand what we're talking about here, about wanting a line in the sand for or for some kind of waiting or not waiting for an order to be issued. But maybe the language I'm trying to get about in a long-winded way is instead of saying implement the actual like plan and like the investments called out in the plan or whatever it is, that this not be deemed as some sort of tacit acknowledgement that if the commission doesn't speak on it or issue an order, then like the plan and its contents are somehow utilities are using this as some kind of furtherance of that. So maybe we just say implement, or sorry, proceed to file. This is what I'm trying to say. Maybe it just says like, if we're just trying to aim at saying, okay, there's a technical sequence. Yeah, proceed to file.
That's file its final electric system plan.
There we go. Thanks.
I don't
And-
think you need final, John. I think you just need to capitalize electric system plan because it's well, it should be defined above.
Yeah.
Which was one of our comments.
Yeah, I also, I think everybody knows that this is not, an indication of prudency. I mean, we need to specify that? Because,
I don't think so.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think the way it's worded now is good.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't think, go ahead, Jacob.
I was gonna say real quick, especially looking at the future steps, I don't know if it makes sense to say file the plan, because obviously there's still additional steps. So should we just say continue with the process or something like that? Or move forward with the process, right? Because I think recognizing some of the gaps we'll have to just revisit, right? The next step is our consideration of feedback. So
Somewhere we need to have a final plan. We had a preliminary plan. You had the conference, somewhere we need a final plan filed in your docket.
well, I think the last thing we have in there is filing, our response to all the feedback, right?
Yeah. Well, then,
That's basically saying, we had our preliminary plan, here's all the final feedback we got, so here is,
well, maybe this is out of order then. Of course, I can't, maybe this comes after. So you have your company's consideration of feedback, and then the very last thing is commission order. Because, and maybe it should be 90 days.
Within 60 days.
Yeah, because we have 60 days of a commission order and within 90 days, so it's kind of confusing the timelines here to say within 60 days.
Or within 90 days.
So get rid of the 60 days of the commission order here. Just say within 90 days.
Yeah, because you've got any commission order there. Absent a commission order provided within 60 days. Then you just have to change 60 to 90 in J1.
Yeah. I'd like to get rid of this too.
Are we anticipating the responses prior to an order?
Yeah, that was the original intent.
All right, so because that time's all jacked up now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think the 90 days would have to be shortened significantly.
Yeah, let me backtrack on some of these things.
I mean, I guess we can talk, maybe we can just figure that out once we talk about the timeline. And just come back to it. Andrea agrees.
All right, so we'll go look at the timeline. All right, I don't have anything else for 4.
All right, why don't we stop there? It's 12:36 now. How about we come back at 1:15?
Sounds good.
All right, sounds good. We'll see everybody then.
All right, thanks.